My name is Olivia Parker. I'm 32 years old, and last month my own mother forgot to book me a room on our family trip. I realized it standing at the front desk of a beach resort, suitcase in hand, while the clerk frowned at the screen and said, "I'm sorry, there's no reservation under your name. I do see 2 rooms for your family, but nothing for you." My stomach dropped. I turned to my mom and my sister, expecting confusion, maybe an apology. Instead, they both looked away like I was some stranger causing a scene. Then my sister laughed, loud enough for everyone in the lobby to hear, and said, "We only reserved rooms for real family. You make good money? You can figure it out, right?" A couple waiting behind us actually sucked in a breath. The clerk looked embarrassed for me. For a second, I just stood there, feeling my face burn, replaying every time they'd told me we were all in this together. I could have begged. I could have tried to argue. Instead, I heard my own voice come out calm and steady. "Then I'll leave." I grabbed my suitcase, turned my back on all of them, and walked straight out of that resort, while my mom hissed my name under her breath like I was the one being rude. By the time my rideshare hit the freeway, my phone lit up with call after call. 20 missed calls, 30, 56. Voicemails, texts, all caps messages from my mother and my sister suddenly desperate for me to pick up. I stared at the screen, hit Do Not Disturb, and put the phone face down. Because what they didn't know was that one person in our family had just found out what they did to me, and he had the power to destroy their entire lifestyle with a single decision. If you've ever been treated like you don't count in your own family, stay with me. Because this is the story of how no reservation for you turned into a financial revenge they never saw coming. On the flight back from that trip, staring out at the clouds, I kept replaying how I even ended up in a family where "no reservation for you" sounded normal coming out of my sister's mouth. I live in Seattle now. I work as a senior product marketing manager for a SaaS company. I make more than enough to pay my own bills, my own condo, and stack investments on top. That part of my life never really involved my parents. The person who shaped that was my grandfather, Edward Collins, my mom's dad. Grandpa Ed made his money in commercial real estate and retired to Scottsdale. But before he ever bought himself a golf club, he drilled one thing into me as a kid: never let anyone hold money over your head. When I was 12, he showed me my first stock statement, helped me open a little custodial account, and said, "You don't ever want to need a check from someone who doesn't respect you, Olivia." At the time, I didn't realize he was talking about my own parents. Sheesh, my mom, Carol, and my dad, Tom, live just outside Austin. To people on Facebook, they're the classic comfortable retirees: HOA neighborhood, pictures from cruises, brunch with friends, matching polos on the golf course. What they don't post is that Grandpa's Collins Family Support Trust quietly covers their HOA dues, a chunk of their insurance, even part of those cruises. My older sister Maddie took a very different path from mine. While I was grinding through college with scholarships and internships, she was busy reinventing herself as Maddie Parker Gray online, a lifestyle and momfluencer with aesthetic coffee photos, day-in-the-life vlogs around Austin, and endless unboxings. She married Jason, had their daughter Lily, and built a whole brand on looking like the perfect young family with the perfect home, perfect SUV, perfect private school. The problem was, her follower count looked impressive, but her bank account didn't. Behind the scenes, Grandpa's trust picked up everything that didn't fit on a credit card: private school tuition, car lease top-ups, a surprising amount of their mortgage. My parents always justified it with the same line: "She has a family, she needs the help more than you do." When we were younger, that favoritism showed up in smaller ways. Maddie got a new car at 16. I took the bus. Maddie's cheer camp and college housing were quietly handled behind the scenes. I spent nights swiping my meal card and stocking shelves to keep my scholarship. Whenever I brought it up, they would toss out some version of, "You're the independent one, Olivia. You're strong. You don't need us." It sounded like a compliment, but it always came with an unspoken part. Because we'd rather spend our money on your sister. Every year, Grandpa would take the whole family on a trip somewhere nice as a way to get everyone together. One year, it was a cabin in Colorado. Another year, a Caribbean cruise. He always booked and paid for everything so no one could use money as an excuse to exclude anyone. But this last time, for San Diego, my parents insisted they would handle it themselves. I remember the group text. My mom wrote, "Dad's been so generous, but it's time we give him a break. We'll take care of this year's trip. It'll be simple, just family time." They chose Sapphire Bay Resort, which was not what I'd call simple. Oceanfront rooms, pool cabanas, a spa my sister could not stop sending reels about. When I asked if Grandpa was still coming, my mom replied, "He's sitting this one out, but he's thrilled we're doing something on our own." At the time, I thought it was sweet. I booked my flight from Seattle, cleared my calendar, and told my team I'd actually be offline for a long weekend. There were little red flags I ignored. My mom never sent me a confirmation number when I asked. She just said, "It's all under one booking. Don't worry about it." Maddie kept joking in the chat. "Olivia's the rich tech girl, she should be in the presidential suite," followed by eye roll emojis. My dad chimed in with, "You make more than all of us. You'll survive a few resort prices," whenever I mentioned budgeting. I brushed it off as the same old teasing. I thought worst case, if something got mixed up, we'd just add my room at check-in, and I'd pay for it myself. I did not think they would sit there, watch the front desk tell me there was no reservation, and let my sister declare I wasn't real family. I didn't know it then, but while I was walking out of that lobby, my mom was already texting Grandpa a watered-down version of the story, trying to get ahead of it. She just didn't realize the man she was talking to had built his entire life on reading people, and that the minute he heard the phrase, "No reservation for Olivia," he was going to start digging for the truth. My flight into San Diego landed just before noon, and by the time I grabbed my carry-on and made it through the chaos of the rental car shuttles and rideshare pickups, I was already picturing the weekend the way my mom had described it. Simple, just family, no drama. The driver pulled up to Sapphire Bay Resort, all glass and white stone and palm trees, the kind of place my sister loved to film slow-motion walks through. I wheeled my suitcase across the polished floor of the lobby, past families in matching t-shirts and couples in linen, and spotted my parents sitting at the bar off to the side. My dad had a beer, my mom had a bright pink cocktail, and they were both looking down at their phones. I smiled, lifted my hand to wave, and in that split second before they looked up, I felt normal, like any other adult kid arriving late to a family vacation. But when my mom finally saw me, her expression flickered. It wasn't surprise or excitement. It was something closer to guilt. My dad gave me a half-hearted wave and then looked back at his drink. I told myself I was imagining it. I went straight to the front desk and gave the clerk my name, my voice cheerful, because I didn't want to start this trip off with my usual defensiveness. He typed, looked at the screen, frowned, typed again. That long pause did something to my stomach. "I'm sorry," he said finally, looking up at me. "I don't have a reservation under Olivia Parker. Are you, maybe under a different last name?" My brain tried to fill in the blanks. Maybe they spelled it wrong. Maybe they put it under one of my parents. "It's a family booking," I said, forcing a laugh. "Try Parker or Collins. Or maybe under Thomas or Carol Parker?" He nodded, clicked around, then said, "I do see 2 rooms under Thomas Parker. 1 king for Thomas and Carol, 1 double queen for Madison Gray and family. But there's nothing that indicates a separate room for you." It felt like someone had suddenly turned the volume up in the lobby. I could hear every suitcase wheel, every ice cube clink. I turned around, expecting my parents to rush over, saying, "Oh, that's a mistake. Let's fix it." Instead, they both stayed seated. My mom took a sip of her drink and pretended to be very interested in the TV above the bar. That's when Maddie appeared, like she had timed her entrance, striding across the lobby in a flowy cover-up, oversized sunglasses, and a designer tote she'd definitely tagged a brand for. "Liv," she called out, like we were best friends, and then, as she reached the desk, she glanced at the computer screen. Her mouth curled into a smile that did not reach her eyes. "Oh," she said loud enough that the couple behind me could hear. "Did Mom forget to book your room?" The clerk's face went from neutral to uncomfortable. He could tell something was off but had no idea where to look. I looked back at my mom. "Did you put me in one of the rooms?" I asked, giving her every chance to say yes. She shifted on her bar stool, set her drink down, and said, without meeting my eyes, "We assumed you'd get your own room, honey. You make more than enough. We already paid for the package for us and Maddie's family. It was just simpler this way." My dad let out this weak, nervous chuckle like he wanted it to sound harmless. "You're our independent one, remember?" he added. Behind me, someone muttered, "Wow," under their breath. Maddie laughed, this sharp, delighted sound, and delivered the line like she'd been practicing it. "We only reserved rooms for real family," she said. "Mom and Dad, me, Jason, and Lily. You're the big tech girl, you can figure something out, right?" She said, "real family," with this little shrug, like it was a harmless joke, but the words hung there like a slap. Real family. As if I'd just wandered in off the street. For a second, I could hear Grandpa's voice in my head from years ago at his kitchen table. "People will tell you who they are when they think you need them. Pay attention." I felt heat crawl up my neck. Not just from the embarrassment, but from the way my mother still wouldn't look directly at me. The clerk cleared his throat. "We can try to add a separate room," he offered gently. "Rates are higher for walk-ins, but I can see what's available." My mom jumped in fast. "She can handle it. She does very well for herself." Like she needed the entire lobby to know I was rich enough that this humiliation didn't count. I thought about all the times they'd assured Grandpa that everything was fine, that the girls were close, that we were all one unit. I thought about how he paid for trips like this, so no one would ever be left out because of money. I could have pulled out my card. I could have swallowed it, laughed, and said, "No worries, put it on me." That's what they were counting on, that I'd fix their cruelty for them. Instead, something in me went still. I looked the clerk in the eye and said clearly, "No, thank you. I won't be staying." Then I turned to my parents and my sister. "If I'm not part of the real family," I said, "you don't need me here." Maddie's smile faltered. My mom finally whispered, "Olivia, don't be dramatic." Like I was the one causing a scene by not accepting being publicly excluded. My dad muttered my name like a warning. I didn't answer. I picked up my suitcase, walked across that lobby with every step louder in my own head than any of the whispers around me, and pushed through the glass doors into the California heat. By the time I slid into the back seat of my rideshare and told the driver to head for the airport, my phone was already buzzing nonstop with their names on the screen. I watched it light up in my hand, then flipped it over, set it face down, and stared out at the road, not knowing yet that this short walk out of a hotel lobby had just triggered the one person in our family who could pull the plug on all of their comfort at once. By the time my driver merged onto the freeway, my phone had already started its meltdown. First a call from Mom, then Maddie, then Mom again. I watched their names flash on the screen and fade out, one after another, while the resort disappeared in the rearview mirror. I didn't pick up. I told myself I'd deal with it when I got home, when I wasn't running on humiliation and adrenaline. 5 minutes later, the missed calls had turned into a flood. 10, 16. 23. Voicemails stacked up, little red dots multiplying next to their names. When it hit 30, even my driver glanced at the screen lighting up in the cup holder and said, "Everything okay?" I let out a short laugh that sounded nothing like me. "My family just realized I meant it when I said I was leaving," I said. He raised his eyebrows, but he didn't push. I opened my messages to silence the notifications, and that was a mistake. A wall of texts hit me all at once. From Mom. "Olivia, come back to the hotel. We can talk this out." From Maddie. "Seriously, Liv, you stormed out over a room?" From Mom again. "We can probably get you a cot or something in Lily's room. Don't ruin the trip over this." Then Maddie. "I told the front desk we might add another room, and they said they'd try. Can you just come back and pay for it so we can relax, please?" There was a voice message from Mom, her tone sharp and breathless. "Olivia, this is ridiculous. You embarrassed us. You made a scene. You know we love you. You know we just assumed you would handle your own room. You make more than all of us combined. Stop punishing us for trying to have a nice family vacation." 10 minutes later. "We need you here. Lily is asking where Aunt Liv is. Stop being dramatic and come back." Somewhere between exit signs, the tone started to shift. The texts got shorter, then more frantic. "Maddie, Grandpa is asking what happened. What did you tell him?" "Mom, your grandfather is calling. I need to know exactly what you said. Do not twist this." Another voicemail popped up. This time from my dad, his voice tight and annoyed. "Olivia, call your mother back. This has gone far enough. We're just trying to have a nice time. You don't get to walk out and then run to your grandfather like a child. You are 32 years old. Handle this like an adult." I stared at the word adult and thought about how I had just been treated like some extra guest at their party. By the time we reached the airport drop-off lane, the number on my missed call counter ticked up to 56. 56 attempts to pull me back into the same pattern where I swallowed their behavior and paid the emotional bill for it. I handed the driver a tip, grabbed my suitcase, and finally did what I probably should have done years ago. I scrolled past my parents' names, past Maddie and Jason, and tapped on Grandpa Ed. He picked up on the second ring. "Olivia," he said, and just the way he said my name made my throat tighten. I had only texted him a quick, "Trip is a mess. We'll call later," before I flew out. "Are you home already?" "No," I said, stepping out of the flow of people near security. "I'm at the airport. I never checked in." There was a pause. "Why not?" I took a breath and told him. Not with the dramatics my mother would accuse me of, not with the spin Maddie would put on it, but exactly, word for word, what had happened. The front desk, no reservation, my parents sitting at the bar. The phrase, "real family," dropping out of Maddie's mouth like it was nothing. The 56 missed calls. Grandpa did not interrupt. I could hear him breathing on the other end. That slow, controlled kind of breathing he did when he was trying not to say something he would regret. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "And your mother said she assumed you would pay for your own room?" he asked finally. "Those were her exact words," I said. "She said it was simpler that way." He made a low sound, almost a laugh, but without any humor in it. "Simpler," he repeated. "Is that what she called taking my support and using it to exclude you?" I swallowed. "I didn't call you to ask you to do anything," I said, because I needed that to be clear. I couldn't keep pretending this was normal. I left. That's all." "You did exactly what you should have done," he said, and there was steel in his voice now. "You removed yourself. You told the truth. The rest is my mess to clean up." "Grandpa, I don't want to start a war," I said. He let out a breath. "Olivia, the war started a long time ago when your mother and father decided that one daughter would always be first and the other would always be fine. Today, they just finally said it out loud in front of witnesses. Listen to me carefully. I'm going to call the hotel. I'm going to ask some questions. And then I'm going to have a little chat with the rest of our real family. You do not answer their calls. You go home, you rest, you go back to work. I will handle this. I could picture him at his desk in Scottsdale, that old leather chair, the neat stack of trust documents he was always reviewing. If anyone knew how to pull receipts, it was him. Are you sure? I asked quietly. Because they already think I ran to you. Good, he said flatly. Let them. It will make it easier when they realize what their little stunt cost them. After we hung up, I turned my phone back over. More texts. More missed calls. One from my mom that read, "Grandpa is being dramatic. Do not tell him some sob story. You know how he gets." I almost laughed right there in line for TSA. She had no idea that the man she was calling dramatic had spent his entire career negotiating with people exactly like her. As I took off my shoes and slid my laptop into the bin, a new email notification appeared at the top of my screen. From Edward Collins. Subject: Emergency family meeting tonight. Required. I opened it long enough to see the first line. We will be discussing the future of the Collins Family Support Trust and the definition of real family. Then I closed my laptop, stepped through the metal detector, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't the one who was about to be judged. That night, after my flight landed back in Seattle and I dragged my suitcase into my condo, the sky outside my windows was already dark. The city was a blur of lights and drizzle, the usual Pacific Northwest mood, but my head was still stuck in that blinding California lobby. I showered, put on sweatpants, made myself something to eat, and tried not to watch the clock. At 8 o'clock sharp, my laptop chimed with the familiar sound of a Zoom meeting starting. I took a breath, opened it, and clicked join. Grandpa's face popped up first, framed by the warm light of his home office in Scottsdale. He sat straight in his leather chair, white hair combed back, glasses low on his nose, wearing the same no-nonsense expression I'd seen in old photos from his real estate days. A second later, my parents' tile appeared. My mom's eyes were red like she'd been crying. My dad's jaw was set so tight it looked painful. Maddie and Jason joined from their hotel room, sitting on the edge of the bed, their matching resort robes almost comical against the tension in the air. Finally, my own little square showed my tired face in the corner. "Thank you all for joining," Grandpa said, his voice calm but carrying a weight that made everyone else quiet. "We won't be here long, but we will be honest. That is non-negotiable." My mom jumped in immediately. "Dad, this is being blown way out of proportion," she said, her voice trembling. "Olivia overreacted to a misunderstanding. We were going to sort it out." "A misunderstanding," Grandpa repeated. He reached off-screen, picked up something, and adjusted his screen so we could see his desktop. A video window popped into view. "The general manager at Sapphire Bay was very helpful," he said. "It turns out longtime clients who book large family packages get a bit of extra courtesy when they ask questions." My stomach dropped. I knew what was coming. He hit play. There it was. The lobby. Me at the front desk. The clerk typing. The moment his face changed, the angle didn't catch every expression clearly, but it caught enough. It caught my parents at the bar, looking over and then deliberately turning away. It caught Maddie walking up, smiling, and then leaning toward the clerk. It caught the moment she said, with that little performative shrug, "We only reserved rooms for real family," and the way I froze before picking up my suitcase and walking out. The audio wasn't crystal clear, but it didn't need to be. You could feel what was happening even on mute. No one spoke while the video played. Even Maddie's usual constant fidgeting stopped. When the screen went back to Grandpa's face, his eyes were colder than I'd ever seen them. "So," he said, folding his hands. Carol, Tom, Madison, would you like to explain this misunderstanding to me? My mom swallowed hard. Dad, you know how these cameras are. They don't catch everything. We were joking. Maddie didn't mean. Do not insult me, he cut in, his voice suddenly razor sharp. I spent 40 years negotiating with people who lied for a living. I know exactly what I'm looking at. You humiliated your daughter in public while sitting 3 feet away and doing nothing. You built that trip on my money, and then used it to exclude the one person in this family who doesn't use me as a walking ATM. Tom finally spoke. We just assumed she'd pay for her own room, he said stiffly. She makes 6 figures, Dad. We're not made of money. We thought you'd appreciate us not asking you to cover another expense. You thought I would appreciate you weaponizing my generosity to cut Olivia out, Grandpa said. You thought wrong. Maddie let out a choked sound. Grandpa, I was kidding, she said, tears spilling over. It was a bad joke. I was stressed. Lily was tired. We had just gotten there. I didn't think she'd actually leave. Grandpa shook his head slowly. The joke wasn't that you excluded her, he said. The joke was that you believed there would be no consequences. Jason shifted uncomfortably beside her, his eyes flicking between the screens like he'd just walked into a business meeting he wasn't prepared for. Grandpa took a breath, then picked up a thick folder from his desk and held it up. I recognized it instantly. The Collins Family Support Trust. For years, he said, I have used this trust to help my family. I paid for schooling, houses, small businesses, medical bills, yes, even golf memberships and resort trips. I did it because I believed it gave all of you a safety net, not a weapon. He opened the folder, pulled out a document, and slid on his glasses. As of this afternoon, I have signed an amendment resigning myself as sole trustee of this fund, he said. My mom's face went white. Dad, what are you talking about? I'm talking about responsibility, he answered. From this moment forward, Olivia is the primary trustee. She has full authority over distributions from this trust to any of you. The silence that followed was almost funny, if it hadn't been my family. My dad actually leaned forward like he hadn't heard correctly. You can't do that, Mom blurted. We depend on that money. The HOA, my prescriptions, the cruise deposit, Lily's school. You're right, Grandpa said coolly. You depend on it. Olivia does not. Which is exactly why she should be the one managing it. She has shown she can live within her means and treat people with respect, without expecting them to buy her way out of bad choices. Maddie shook her head, tears streaming now. Grandpa, please, she said. Jason and I. This year was hard. Brand deals fell through. Jason's commission. And instead of tightening your belt, you filmed unboxings and let my money paper over the cracks, he said. Then you used my trip to cut your own sister out. You do not get to play the victim here. His eyes moved to my square. Olivia, as of now, you will receive full access to the trust statements and distribution controls. I've instructed my attorney to walk you through every step. You are not obligated to give anyone in this call a single cent. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Grandpa, I don't want revenge, I said quietly, aware of everyone else listening. I just wanted them to stop treating me like an outsider they could use when it was convenient. This isn't revenge, he said. This is accountability. What you choose to do with that is up to you. My mom turned to her camera, her voice switching into the pleading tone she always reserved for when a credit card got declined. Olivia, sweetie, don't let him put you in the middle, she said. We're your parents. We've always done our best. You know your sister didn't mean to hurt you. You can just keep things as they are, right? There it was, the old script. The one where I was the reasonable one, the fixer, the buffer between their bad decisions and their comfort. I stared at their anxious faces, at Maddie's mascara streaks, at Jason's clenched jaw, and felt something settle inside me. No, I said. I'm not keeping things as they are. Grandpa's right. This isn't working. Tom's voice hardened. What exactly are you saying, Olivia? I met his eyes through the webcam. I'm saying that starting now, there will be no automatic distributions, I said. No more paying for cruises or private school or HOA fees or golf memberships. If any support comes out of this trust for you, it will be because it's truly necessary and because you've treated everyone in this family with basic respect. And until I see that, I'm freezing everything. Maddie gasped. You can't do that, she said, echoing my mom's words. Lily. Lily is not the problem here, I said, my voice softening just a little. You are. You don't get to hide behind her while you use Grandpa's money to keep pretending your life is something it's not. My mom started to cry again, this time out of sheer panic. Olivia, we can't afford to lose that money, she said. We'll have to move. Then maybe, Grandpa cut in. You should have thought of that before you decided one of my granddaughters was less real than the other. No one had an answer for that. For the first time in my life, the silence in a family conversation felt like relief instead of pressure. Grandpa glanced at his watch. We're done for tonight, he said. Olivia, I'll call you tomorrow with the attorney's information. The rest of you, I suggest you start making budgets based on your actual income. Good night. One by one, their faces disappeared from the screen, leaving me sitting in the glow of my laptop in my quiet Seattle condo. I closed the lid, ordered a pizza, and sank into my couch. My phone buzzed across the room with new messages I didn't bother to check. For once, I wasn't the one scrambling to fix the damage. I was the one holding the plug, and I had finally decided I didn't have to keep their lights on. 2 weeks after that Zoom call, my life looked almost exactly the same on the surface, which was the strangest part. I still woke up to gray Seattle mornings, still made my coffee, still took the light rail into the office, still sat in the same meetings about launch timelines and messaging frameworks. The only real difference was that between calls about market segmentation and customer personas, I was also on the phone with my grandfather's attorney, walking through spreadsheets and statements for a trust I had never expected to control. The Collins Family Support Trust dashboard sat in its own tab on my laptop, all neat columns and numbers that suddenly had real faces attached to them. For years, those numbers had quietly paid for things I only half knew about. Now, every canceled auto transfer felt like a small, clean cut away from an old, infected wound. The first visible crack came from Maddie's world. She had been the kind of person who posted almost daily, get ready with me videos, school drop-off vlogs, carefully staged shots of brunch and shopping bags. About 5 days after I froze the distributions, her content slowed, then stopped. Her last video was a weekend at the resort recap with a smiling thumbnail that did not include me, of course. I didn't follow her closely, but mutual friends started sending me screenshots. The comments shifted from OMG, living my dream to you've been quiet, everything okay? To one blunt, how do you afford all this on influencer money? There were no replies. Instead, my phone lit up with a long text from Jason one night, his number popping up for the first time in years. He didn't bother with small talk. He wrote that he had just found out how much of their life had been floating on Grandpa's trust, how many brand deals had actually been covered by family support. He apologized for not seeing it sooner, for assuming the money was some vague inheritance thing and not a monthly lifeline. He said losing the trust meant they'd had to pull Lily out of her private school, return a leased SUV early, and put their house up for sale before they missed another payment. He ended with, I don't blame you, Olivia. I just wish your in-laws had been honest with me instead of using your grandfather's generosity as a shortcut. I sat with that message for a long time before answering. When I finally replied, I was honest. I told him I was sorry they were hurting, but that I wasn't going to turn the tap back on just to keep up appearances. He didn't ask me to. That, more than anything, told me he understood. My parents cracked in quieter ways. The first sign was an email from my dad with a subject line that just said, "Update." It listed numbers, HOA dues, prescription costs, a looming property tax bill. He mentioned that the cruise company had canceled their reservation and kept part of the deposit when the final payment didn't go through. The part that stuck with me wasn't the math. It was the line where he wrote, "We're realizing now how much of what we called our retirement was actually your grandfather's safety net." At the end of the email, almost as an afterthought, he added, "For what it's worth, what happened at the resort was wrong. I should have stopped it. I'm sorry." There was a time when an apology like that would have made me rush to fix everything. This time, I wrote back and thanked him for saying it, then gently told him what I was telling everyone. The trust was for emergencies and actual needs, not for maintaining a lifestyle they couldn't afford. I told him I wasn't going to let any of them sink, but I also wasn't going to keep paying for golf memberships and cruise packages. He didn't argue. A few days later, my mom sent a shorter message, full of half-finished sentences and, "I never meant," and, "You have to understand." Buried in the middle was the closest thing she had ever come to taking real responsibility. I thought if I kept Maddie happy, I could keep the family together. I didn't see that I was pushing you out every time I did it. I read that line 3 times and felt something in my chest loosen, but not enough to make me forget the lobby, the phrase, "real family," the way she looked away from me. At work, while all of this was happening in my inbox, my boss pulled me into a one-on-one and told me the executive team wanted me to lead a new product launch. It came with a bonus and a very clear path to a promotion at the end of the year if it went well. I walked out of that meeting thinking about how my parents had always used my independence as an excuse to give me less, and how that same independence was now the reason I could stay steady while their world shook. Late one evening, after a long day of back-to-back calls, I got an email from Grandpa. It was short. "I've reviewed everything with the attorney," he wrote. "You're doing exactly what I hoped you would do. Not cruel, not soft, just fair. They are all angry now, but sometimes anger is just grief for a fantasy dying. Let it die. What grows after will be more honest." I closed my laptop, made myself tea, and sat by the window watching the rain streak down the glass. My family was finally feeling the real weight of choices they'd made for years. For once, I wasn't the one carrying it for them. 3 months after that night on Zoom, my life had settled into something I hadn't had in a long time. A rhythm that didn't revolve around wondering what my family would do next. The launch I'd been given at work went better than anyone predicted. Our new product hit its adoption targets early, my team pulled off a flawless campaign, and one Friday afternoon, my boss closed the conference room door, smiled, and told me they were promoting me to director. The title change came with a raise, more stock, and a strange sense of calm. For the first time, I looked at my financial plans and realized that if I wanted to, I could walk away from all of this in a decade and still be okay. I didn't need anyone's trust, anyone's approval, anyone's permission. That realization hit harder than the promotion itself. My family's life, on the other hand, did not look the same. Maddie and Jason sold their house in the manicured neighborhood and moved into a smaller rental on the edge of town. Lily switched to a public school with a playground that didn't have a sponsorship logo on every slide. The luxury SUV disappeared from their driveway. Jason sent me a picture of their new used crossover with a caption that just said, "It runs. That's enough." Maddie's social media went through an awkward silence and then, slowly, a shift. The glossy unboxings and effortless brunches gave way to grocery haul videos with store brands in the cart, clips of her talking about making a real budget for the first time in her life, and quiet apologies buried in captions. I spent years pretending I had it all together. I didn't. I hurt people I love trying to keep that illusion alive. She never tagged me, never mentioned the resort or the trust, but she didn't have to. I knew exactly which illusion had finally broken. My parents fought the changes at first. There were a few panicked emails about one-time exceptions and temporary help that sounded a lot like the just this once requests they'd been making for a decade. I stuck to the same answer every time. The trust was there for true emergencies and basic needs, not for keeping them in a house or a social circle that no longer fit their actual income. Eventually, the emails changed. One Sunday afternoon, a physical letter arrived in my mailbox with my mother's handwriting on the envelope. Inside was a page written on the good stationery she used to save for holiday cards. She talked about selling the house, about moving into a modest condo closer to town, about how strange it felt to shop without just putting it on the card and letting Dad handle it. She admitted, in ink, that she had spent most of her adult life trying to keep Maddie from falling apart and had used me as the counterweight, the one she didn't have to worry about. I told myself you were strong enough to be left out, she wrote. I never stopped to ask if you wanted to be. At the end, in smaller, shakier letters, she added, You were right to walk out of that lobby. I'm sorry I made you feel like you weren't part of your own family. I didn't cry when I read it, but I did sit there a long time with the paper in my hands, feeling every word land in places I hadn't realized were still sore. A week later, my dad called, just to tell me about a financial literacy workshop they were taking at the community center, how they were learning the difference between can afford and can pay for right now. It was the first time I'd ever heard him talk about money without defensiveness or performance. As trustee, I made a few carefully chosen decisions. I approved payments for Lily's therapy when she started asking hard questions about why they had moved and why Mommy cried when bills came in. I signed off on a medical expense for my mom when she had a scare, and her new insurance didn't cover everything. I did not turn the cruise money back on. I did not reinstate the golf club. I didn't do it to be cruel. I did it because for the first time, the money in that trust was finally doing what Grandpa had meant it to do. Support, not enable. One evening, I flew down to Scottsdale to see him. We sat on his patio as the sun went down, the sky turning that impossible desert pink. He listened as I told him about the promotion, about the letters, about how the family group chat had gone from performative vacation photos to actual honest updates. He nodded, took a sip of his iced tea, and said, You know, I wasn't sure what would hurt them more. Losing the money or losing the version of themselves they could only afford with it. Then he looked at me and added, I'm just glad you didn't lose yourself trying to keep that version alive. That, more than anything, felt like the real ending of the story. Not the moment at the front desk, not the Zoom call, not even the frozen trust, but sitting there knowing I had drawn a line and survived it. I still see my family. We talk, cautiously at first, then more naturally as new habits form. They are smaller in some ways than the people they played online, but they are also more real. We argue, we apologize, we start over. I keep boundaries. I keep the trust pointed at needs, not fantasies. And when I think back to that lobby, to the words real family thrown at me like a joke, I don't feel the same sharp burn anymore. I feel something closer to gratitude that they finally said out loud what had been true for years, because it gave me permission to choose what real family meant to me. Here's what I learned the hard way. Being independent doesn't mean you're the one who has to carry everyone else. Having money doesn't mean you owe it to people who use it to disrespect you. And walking away from a table where you're only welcome when you're paying is not cruelty. It's self-respect. If you've ever been made to feel like the extra chair at your own family's table, I hope you remember this. You are allowed to leave the resort lobby. You are allowed to put your phone on Do Not Disturb. You are allowed to build a life where the only people who get a reservation are the ones who treat you like you're part of the real family, whether you're picking up the check or not.